We have made it to the 2028 NFL Draft here in the 5th offseason of the St. Louis Dragons franchise here on Madden 24. And today we will be doing our draft preview, going through the class as a whole, talking mock drafts at the end of the episode. Last time around we had free agency, and this was a pivotal one for our St. Louis Dragons because we knew this roster was going to see some major overhaul. The team was disappointing last year. The vibes of the roster were pretty off. And because of that, we knew we had to shuffle the deck. We made some big decisions. I would argue none of which bigger than giving Simeon Bonnet a 4-year extension for $160 million, along with re-signing other key players such as Jeff Okudah, Owen Popo, Demore Diggins, Devontae Wyatt, Darwin Juskins, and others. In free agency, I really wanted to spend, particularly on the offensive and defensive lines. My top target was offensive guard Martin Llewellyn, who ended up going back to the Texans 2 years, $28 million, despite the fact that we offered him a contract north of $80 million, but his agent apparently is a complete buffoon. We did sign Sharif Sully, 4 years, $80 million to be the long-term left tackle. We signed DJ Orleans, a highly productive pass rusher, amongst other players on the offensive and defensive lines. We were also pretty active on the trade market. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers stole away Griffin Weaver and Tykeem Keon Jr. from us, meaning that somebody like Amarion Cephas is kind of on the outside looking in of this receiving group. And Cephas was a guy I had already been looking at trading for anyway, so it worked out, giving up B.J. Ojulari and some draft picks. We also gave up Devin White, a longtime staple in the defense, in exchange for run-stuffing nose tackle Bubba Watkins and a top 100 pick from the New England Patriots. There were plenty of other trades around the league as well, most notably Justin Jefferson going to the New Orleans Saints for a plethora of draft capital as Minnesota looks to start things over, likely drafting a quarterback in the first round. As we look at our draft capital, we've got 4 picks in the top 100, so an opportunity to add some of the top-end talent of this class. But right now, we only have 2 picks after that in rounds 6 and 7, so we don't exactly have a ton of day 3 capital. But you guys know me, I love moving up and down the board, so don't be surprised if we make some trades, whether it's moving up for a guy we really like, as we've done in the past with Samandre Mack, the guard as an example, or moving down, as we did with Cam Lucifer the year prior. It's a really intriguing draft class because the quarterbacks, it's kind of unclear if these guys are worth going number 1 overall, and then from there, the top projected player in this class is a wide receiver. We've done prospect profiles with these guys throughout this season, but we're going to take a more in-depth look here at really the draft class as a whole and how these guys will ultimately affect the way the board plays out. As we look at our roster, the goal of free agency was to make sure we didn't have any glaring holes. That way we can go into the draft focusing on picking best player available while still being able to fill out spots that could use some upgrades. That starts with the quarterback position, and in the last episode I talked about why adding a quarterback early would be off the table for us, and that Puma Whitlock is our guy. Nonetheless, there are some talented QBs at the top. Simone Rashid IV from Georgia will kick our list off. I'm not quite sure if he's as good as prospects as guys like Puma Whitlock, Callaghan October, and Ty Poland, who have been top 3 picks. But Rashid's an interesting case. 6'6", 212 pounds. He's built pretty similarly to Puma in the sense that he's tall and skinny. He's got a pretty good arm, pretty mobile, but the accuracy is what's really exciting about him. He can make every throw on the field. And then Gavin Hennessy stands at 6'5", 230 pounds. He's a little bit thicker. He's got the best arm in the draft class and one of the strongest arms we've seen of a quarterback prospect over the last few years. I don't think he's the athlete that Rashid is. I don't think he's quite as good out of structure, and I don't think his accuracy is as top-notch, but he's got the elite physical traits and the arm strength that make you go, wow. Aristotle Casablanco from Colorado has had a great second half of his season and has played himself into first-round conversation, and he could very well make it 3 quarterbacks off the board in round 1, 6'4", 230, big arm, has a beautiful deep ball. I do question the depth in this QB class. Alessio Armanda and Charlie Davenport could very well be day 2 picks along with Mordecai Quiver, but I'm not really sure if there's a likelihood of finding a franchise quarterback outside of the first round. So if you need your QB, get him early. I think this running back class is really interesting because there's so many different flavors of players Vince Ferguson from LSU, big physical runner at 6 foot, 230 pounds. Keenan Sullivan from Florida State, a little bit smaller. He's somebody who's more of a between the tackles runner, somebody who's a big home run threat when he gets the ball in his hands, and somebody who can take it the distance on every carry. Then you've got Coco Reyna, who's more of your third down back, somebody who's really good catching the ball out of the backfield, but can also provide steadiness as a runner on early downs as well. So I think there's a few guys who very well could be RB1 because of the different skill sets we've got. Down the board, I don't think it's an overly deep running back class, but there are some guys I like. Yusufa Asiatu from Tennessee has had his stock go up. Bam Bam Jones, Patolomayo Molowalu Jr., and Javon Henderson headline the list for rounds 3 and beyond. That'll bring us to the wide receiver position, where it is a loaded class, especially at the top. I would not rule out the Dragons picking a receiver early. The fact that we've got a pretty good receiving core as is, I feel like if there is a year to add one in the first couple of rounds, it's this one, because there's probably 6 or 7 guys who could end up going round 1, and there could be other guys who ultimately slip because of that. Texas A&M's Erebus Dorlum is really the player to watch, though. There's a chance he ends up being the number 1 pick, which is rare for a receiver. But at 6'4", 230 pounds, he runs routes like Keenan Allen. He makes plays after the catch like Deebo Samuel. And he's got the athleticism and physicality of DK Metcalf. Need I say more? He is the complete package and the best receiver prospect to enter the NFL since Calvin Johnson over 20 years ago. Behind him, though, there's plenty of options for the 31 teams who are going to miss out on Dorlum. That starts with Feliciano Devereaux out of Ohio State. 5'11", 201. He's not the biggest, but he can play in the slot and the outside. 4.37 40-yard dash, really athletic, really good with the ball in his hands. Sullivan Obsidian is one of the stranger player profiles in this class. At 6'3", 200 pounds, he's built like a physical receiver, and he is. Great separator, but he's really good with the ball in his hands. He's just lacking high-end NFL traits. Iggy Maddox from Colorado State might be the best pure route runner in the class. He's been one of the most statistically impressive receivers in the country, playing himself into the first round. Bubakar Barry from Georgia was a top 10 pick going into the year, but he's been a little bit inconsistent, had a disappointing combine, but off of his past pedigree, he still could go in the first round. He might not even be the top Georgia receiver, though, if Arkell Griffin's rise. Aiden Romeo out of Virginia is a really impressive deep threat. This is somebody who's able to stretch the field with his 4.37 40 time at 6'3", 210 pounds. Marcus Archer from Oregon's another bigger guy, 6'3", 201 pounds. He's a physical receiver who's really good in terms of catching in traffic. Good hands. He's someone who can stretch the field himself and is ultra athletic. Ford Pryor from USC, one of the youngest receivers in the class at only 20 years old. Teams really like the upside, but he's not a good separator. Daquan Dumas from Ole Miss, the complete opposite. He's a really good short yardage receiver. Very good separator. Very good within 15 yards. I think he's going to be best made as a slot guy. Nate Ware Jr. is a player who I want to go over because he's big, he's physical, 6'2", 220 pounds. He's basically a tight end out there the way he plays receiver, but he's got the athleticism to manage with quick corners. Jalen Mallard from BYU is a big-time playmaker after the catch as well. Once we get into day 3, though, it's not an overly deep group. If you want one of these receivers, I think you got to do it within the top 100 picks. At tight end, we've got Arantino Clase Blanco, the brother of the Colorado quarterback prospect. 6'4", 250 pounds, mauler in the run game, really steady as a pass catcher. And then Oluwafemi Adenziah from Auburn is more of your high upside athletic freak swing, who maybe isn't as good right off the bat as Clase Blanco, but he's got the physical tools to be a star. I think it's a semi-deep tight end class, a few guys who very well could make a case to go in the top 100 after them. Let's move to the offensive line. Not as big of a need for us, but still an area we very well could look at. Latrell McCoy, the Clemson tackle, has solidified himself as a first-rounder. 6'7", 360. He is gigantic. A mountain in the passing game. He will not let opposing pass rushers get to the quarterback. Out of Ohio State, the next tackle in this group is Cowan Naster. He's more athletic, 6'6", 213 pounds. And then Justin Harris Jr., a little bit smaller, but a really good pass protector in his own right. At right tackle, the headlining name here is Zamarion Kingsley. 6'6", 325 pounds, incredible in the run game. Needs to be a little bit more consistent in the pass game. I think his footwork can be a little inconsistent there, but other than that, I think he's got sky-high upside. Vince Rossetti out of Kentucky, very similar player, built pretty much identically physically, and I think their skill sets are similar. Killian Kennedy from Oregon, 6'7", 340 pounds. Somebody who I think has the athletic traits to be really good. He's a little bit raw, but if he goes to a team with a high development track, I think he could be awesome. And then Jaden Story from Florida, 6'7", 360, another ultra big guy who's going to look to use his size to get himself into the first round. Riker Hubbard leads the guard class out of the University of Miami. 6'6", 355 pounds, one of the most polished players in the entire draft class. And behind him, I feel like there's a lot of depth at guard with Tanner Hollister, Manitor Cunningham, and Lionel Huxley. And then at right guard, again, very deep. Not top heavy. No one here I think is going to go in the top 50. But Imani Mercedes, Keontae Bentley, Pagion, and Mason Rosenberg are all really, really good players. At center, though, Benjamin Dover very well could make his way into the first round, which is rare for centers. It happens every so often. And I think Dover is going to be the next on the list. 6'3", 330. Checks all the boxes as a blocker. Really good athlete. Not a deep group, though, at center, which I think means Dover very well could go earlier than expected. Maybe the top 20. Let's move to the defensive line. We'll start inside and work our way out. Sabbath Katopodis from Clemson's a fun player. 6'5", 300 pounds. I like what he can do in the run game, but you're drafting him to go after the quarterback. Dynamic pass rusher. Elliott Sy from Michigan State's a very different player. 350 pounds. He's a nose tackle. Plug him into the middle of the defense. He's not going to put up the big numbers, but get him to clog rushing lanes. Chukwuma Minky from Iowa State is built similarly, but I think he's actually got some pass rush ability to his game, which is going to lead him to having more upside than those top two guys. Shakur Wilkins, another nose tackle, and Jerron Bullingham, an all-around 3-down defensive lineman. Both very well could go in the first round. I think it's a semi-deep group at defensive tackle as we move over to the edge. Dylan Jesperstad out of Utah very well could be the first defensive player off the board. 6'4", 275. He wins with power, and his best pass rushing moves is where he's able to use his brute force to out-maul the offensive tackle. Akko Mako from Washington has had a great season, especially in the run game, playing himself into the first round. He was a guy I really liked for us in the second round. That's not going to happen anymore. Traylon Marshall from Ohio State, 6'5", 260. Dynamic pass rusher. Great get off. Flies off the edge. I think it's a semi-deep group. Kalen Brown, I think, is pretty good, and I like a handful of the guys on day 3. As we move over to the other defensive end spot, headlined by Mapanos Gaspar out of Middle Tennessee State. I don't think he's as polished as Jesperstad out of Utah, but if you want the physical upside, I think Gaspar's your guy. 6'6", nearly 320 pounds. The way this kid moves at his size is unbelievable. Combine that with his overall strength and his power in the run game and in the pass game, look out. I think Zion Creed is a very good consolation prize for him. 6'5", 280 pounds. Really well-rounded player. I think the floor with Creed is super high, and he'll be able to contribute at a high level right away. Johnny Green and Deshaun Dayton are really good as well. I think there is a lot of depth in terms of left ends down the board, more so than right ends. At outside linebacker, Amari Adai from Syracuse is a name to watch. He's a pure edge rusher, not somebody who's really going to cover for you. He's going to have to gain some weight, but I think with his quickness off the edge, he could be special. Alejandro Hernandez from Florida State is also a pure pass rusher. He's a little bit bigger at 255 pounds, not quite as explosive as Adai, but I think with his size, he's probably going to be a better player off the bat. Bobo Ray from Georgia is a little bit more versatile. This is somebody who you can use really in a variety of ways at linebacker, whether it's off the ball or as an edge rusher. I feel like he's a jack-of-all-trades, master of none type. And then Reynard Rocco from Auburn, again, more of a pure pass rusher. Doesn't really cover. Good get-off the edge. Pretty good run stopper as well. And then in terms of depth, there are a couple other guys who could go in the top 100 of this group, but not much on day 3. At right outside linebacker, Pop Armstrong from Florida. In the previous prospect profile I had with him, I said he was Walmart TJ Watt because of his ability to do anything you need for the defense. If you want a linebacker who's versatile and can do anything you ask of him, that's Pop Armstrong. Amui Kaya Okamale from UCLA is a fun player, 6'4", 245. He's another guy who's really good across the board, dynamic pass rusher, very good against the run. He can cover as well. I'd like to see him add some more weight, though. I think that would go a long way. Shadon Hazelwood is undersized, 6'2", 245, but he flies off the edge. Very quick player, very explosive. In terms of depth, a lot of guys here on day 2, but again, not a ton of edge rush talent in terms of the day 3 guys. As we move to middle linebacker, one of the weaker positions in this class, I do like Adonis Bazana out of Kentucky, Really good cover player, and he can absolutely lay the boom. But overall, it is a pretty weak group in terms of off-ball linebacker. Let's move over to corner. Adrian Hoker from Indiana would be my bet to be the top corner off the board. He's a unique player, but a really good one. I think he can play on the outside. He's got the physicality to do it, but he's at his best in the slot, and I think he could be one of, if not the best slot corners in the NFL right away. He's excellent in zone coverage, really good ball skills, and I think with his size and length, he can guard just about any receiver needed. Juju Banks from Tulane is more of a traditional outside corner. Great ball skills, great in man coverage, great in press coverage. I think both of those guys go in the top 15. Behind them, there is sort of the next cluster, and that starts with Desarion Sowell out of Wake Forest, another primarily zone cover corner. And then there's Sherman Poodles, who's got the best ball skills of any corner in this draft class. At 6'3", 195, I think his athletic upside could lead to a high ceiling in coverage. Liam Travers from North Carolina is a super fun player because he plays on both sides of the ball. He'll likely stay at corner at the next level, but when he gets the ball off of an interception or a kick return, he'll still be dynamic in the NFL. Armani Brown out of Ohio State's a really good player as well. He's also got very good ball skills, very physical in coverage, good run defender, but he's a little bit inconsistent, especially if you've got a bigger receiver on him on an island. That's where Brown generally struggles. I will say I don't think it's a particularly deep group at corner. The Dragons don't need corner right now, but their top 4 corners all expire in 2 years from now. So if St. Louis picks a corner early, don't be that surprised. I would be very surprised, though, if the Dragons draft a safety early, being that we've done it 3 years in a row. I don't think it's going to happen again. There are still some fun players here to look out for. Harrison Hayward Jr. from Florida State, really good cover player, also very good in the run. The next group after him is headlined by Jonathan Bowie, Isaac Artest, and Marquez Johnson. And then at strong safety, Keithon Branch, 6'4", 220. He's more of your box safety, plays the run really well. Not entirely dissimilar to Ryan Nada, another Michigan guy, who of course we drafted in the first round last year. Neville Ronan is 8 inches shorter. Better in coverage, though. I think he's got more range in that department. And there you go. That is our draft class. Every position in its entirety. Before we wrap up, though, we've got to take a look at these mock drafts. Where are the quarterbacks going? How high are they going to be picked? And which teams could be looking at QB? Who ends up going number 1 overall? Will it be one of the cornerbacks? Will it be Arevis Dorlum for Texas A&M? Or could it be a surprise? And most notably for us, who are the St. Louis Dragons going to pick in the first round? Being that we mostly filled out the offensive and defensive lines in free agency, there aren't that many immediate needs that we have to attend to, which means we can kind of let the board play out how we wish. So the mock draft has decided to throw as a curveball. They've got Latrell McCoy, the tackle out of Clemson, number 1. He's a good prospect, but I can't see it. The Titans have been awful 4 years in a row. I get they used a high pick on Otto Askew, but he's nearing the end of his rookie contract. It's time to move on. The Vikings as well, I would expect them to pick a quarterback, being that they let Deontay Harris walk. Guys like Amari Adai and Sabev Katopotis going to the top 5 would also really surprise me. And I don't think there's any way Arevis Dorlum falls to 4. I think he's way too good. Best player in the class. He should not fall out of the top 3. The first quarterback still is not off the board. And it would take until pick 15 with Simone Rashid getting drafted by the Colts, which is a little bit surprising. I get that Anthony Richardson's been kind of a disappointment. He's been there for 5 years now. But they did give him a second contract, and it seems like they still believe in him. The St. Louis Dragons pick Reynard Recco out of Auburn. I think that pick would make a lot of sense, getting another body in there to go after the quarterback. And speaking of QBs, no Aristotle Casablanco, the Colorado quarterback, and even more surprisingly, no Gavin Hennessy out of Alabama. I have a hard time thinking Hennessy won't go in the top 5 to 10 picks, let alone outside of the first round entirely. That would be wild. So that's going to wrap up the episode. Again, this is where we stand draft pick-wise. 4 picks in the top 100, only 2 after that. But we've still got plenty of ammunition to move up and down and add to that. I think it's a really intriguing class, and I see a lot of guys who could contribute for us as soon as this year. And for a team who needs an infection of youth, I think that would help us and hopefully bring this team out of, I guess, the bad vibes that we had last year. Hope everyone enjoyed. Next episode will be the 2028 NFL Draft. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.